Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us. Ray's Talk Show is the home for conversation on politics and current events that are impacting our lives and what we can do about it. And doing so, we like to also provide you the perspective of Latinos in all of these debates. 55 million Americans have something to say, and we don't hear it nearly enough. Again, thank you so much for joining us. You can subscribe to Ray's Talk Show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, anywhere you can find a podcast, or just find us at rayspodcast.com and at Ray's Podcast on Twitter and your social media platforms. You can also email me, the host, Ray Collazo, with your commentary, your ideas for show topics, or anything else on your mind. You can email me at podcastrays@gmail.com. That's podcastrays@gmail.com. Shout out to Leo Perales out in Washington State who reached out to me the other day. I actually think it was through a DM, which is fine. Appreciates the show that we're doing here at Ray's Talk Show, and is in the process of beginning his own podcast, the Perales Report. So we want to give Leo and all of our friends out in the Yakima Valley in the far west of this country, in the Pacific Northwest, our love. And I finally know who's downloading our shows in the Yakima Valley. It was a bit of a mystery, I must say. But I'm glad that Leo reached out, and we'll be collaborating with Leo and our friends out in the Pacific Northwest in the coming episodes. On this episode of Ray's Talk Show, we will hear from Houston resident Conchita Reyes on her harrowing personal account, surviving and serving others in the midst of Hurricane Harvey in the Texas Gulf area, and how the aftermath has impacted her community. Conchita's story, you have to listen to her story about helping people in the most dire of conditions, is truly gripping. So check out Conchita's interview in a moment on the show here, Ray's Talk Show. We will also discuss later in the show some actual good news that came out of Texas over the last several days, and some thanks we need to give on this Labor Day weekend and week. But first, a few words on DACA. For those that did not see the news over the last several days, President Trump may already have announced this decision, depending on when you download this show, on the implementation of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals executive order. In fact, in the moments before hitting the record button for this segment, it was announced that it was released that not President Trump himself, but his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, will be making the announcement tomorrow morning. Another spineless move by a spineless man, letting someone else do his dirty work for him. But I'm sure the very bigoted Attorney General doesn't mind doing the hatchet job. But as of this Labor Day night, it's quite likely that President Trump and his minions will announce the termination of the program in some form and punt the future of DACA to Congress. And I just want to make something very clear to people in terms of thinking about why is this happening, the timing of it. Of course, him pardoning Arpaio in the midst of a natural disaster in this country. So let's make it clear. He has nothing left to give his supporters but hate. He's not going to improve their health care. He's not going to spur job creation, address income inequality, the supposed reasons why they voted for him in the first place. His agenda, if you're paying any attention, is actually going in the complete opposite direction. He's sabotaging the Affordable Care Act with no funding for marketing during the enrollment period, various other mechanisms to sabotage the effectiveness of the ACA. His proposed federal budget and tax reform plans, all they do is squeeze working people. They don't provide working people significant tax relief. And if you look at the various proposals and various initial bills that have come out of the House of Representatives, there's cuts to anti-poverty programs, including a refundable tax credit for the child tax credit, specifically for I-10 filers. Again, another anti-immigrant, anti-Latino puño against our community. But I've been saying this for 2 years, and that's why you have to listen to Ray's Talk Show, because myself and others that are seeing this and are trying to give people a perspective of what's really happening here beyond the headlines and the salaciousness of cable television. We've been saying it for 2 years. Trump has always been a faux populist. That was all a scam. This idea that, this rich guy in his way, the way he was plain spoken and shooting from the hip, was in some way going to fight for the working person in this country, is a total fraud. It's always been. And let's be clear what we've been dealing with here, even well beyond the Latino-specific issues that are the focus of much of this conversation today. He is running a far right-wing, fascistic presidency that's only as fascist as it is incompetent. So he has nothing left to give his supporters. Nothing. But hate. With the possible termination of DACA, he's throwing nearly 1 million Americans off the tax rolls. But we need more revenue. He's getting rid of revenue and into a life of peril. This doesn't make Americans safer, doesn't improve our economy. It actually does the opposite. The complete opposite of that. But it gives his base some sort of sick comfort that hate and blocking progress for people of color and the other. In this case, today it's tomorrow it's Latinos. The next day it's transgendered Americans. The next day it's working women, and he's been blocking fair wage programs, which Ivanka Trump have eventually ended up supporting her father on over the last several days. All of this sickness and his hatred to others in some way supposed to make his base feel like America is great again. Let me tell you something beyond politics. If you believe throwing others' lives into chaos is going to make your life better, then this problem is much bigger than Trump and, quite honestly, much bigger than politics. And that's been my singular message over the last several weeks. If you've been listening to Ray's Talk Show, and I appreciate that you do, that the biggest problem with Steve Bannon, whether he's in the White House or out of the White House, is that Steve Bannon's political instincts have been correct. That hatred and discrimination and dog whistling, bullhorning, sympathizing white supremacists, demonizing Latinos again and again and again and again and again, mixing it in with demonizing other groups, even the Jewish community, that's working, unfortunately, for, you want to say, a quarter, 35% of the country. It's a pretty significant chunk of our country is buying this nonsense. And on some level, whether you're openly a white supremacist, or you're just quietly nodding your head, moving forward, and supporting this man that, even though you don't believe you're a quote-unquote racist, on some level, you don't mind the hate. You don't mind people being targets, like I am in my day-to-day life, as a Latino, as a person of color, as someone that could be thought of as a Middle East person of Middle Eastern descent, and possibly a Muslim. Someone speaks out against social justice. Although my grandparents fought in World War II, although I've been a taxpayer in good standing with a clean record my entire life, I did everything as an American I was supposed to do: work hard, be a person of faith, get an education, and then dedicate my career to servicing others. I would make more money selling fine liquors and doing other things, but I've dedicated my career to public service. All of that, doing everything right, having a history of military service in my family. My parents being people of service and decency. My wife and her family being everybody's decent, doing things the American way. This administration has made me, my wife, my kids, my relatives, many people in my life targets, literal targets. That doesn't make anybody better. It only makes us distrustful, fearful, stressed. And pissed off. My last point on DACA in this episode of Ray's Talk Show is this, and then we'll get into the conversation with Conchita Reyes to support and, again, listen, the real Houston story. These actions of spitefulness and institutional racism are only going to intensify. It's not going to end with this. There'll be beefed up deportations. There'll be shows of that. He'll be on the border and put 300 Mexican men in a truck and make to rah-rah the base to avoid hide the conversation about Russia, hide the conversations about all the malfeasance, particularly fiscally, that's happened during this administration. Mass incarceration, he's just going to throw as many black people away as he can. There'll be seemingly random military actions against Middle East actors. At some point, we'll be doing something against Venezuela. Mark my words, it sounds ridiculous. A lot of oil down there, Tillerson wants, my friends. He'll pick a fight with Puerto Rico. The debt issue, he'll spin that into something that Puerto Rico did and try to get rid of us, try to sue us. I mean, it'll be ridiculous. He's already, as I predicted last year, he's opening the door for our police forces to have access to military equipment. We will have a tank, a police force in this country. If he's around for 4 years in this first term, we'll have a tank. Mark my words, I've said it. We're going in that direction. Folks, this isn't Estonia in 1972. We don't live in the Eastern Bloc here. Look what's happening. If you live in the United States, you want to stay in the United States, I encourage all of you to do what you can to protect it. If the president, which seems, there will be an announcement, and I doubt it'll be anything we're going to be happy with. Once the announcement happens in the coming hours, we will develop a special episode of Ray's Talk Show dedicated to not only what happened, what this means for our DACA recipients, short and long term, and what we are going to do next, which is something I'm already getting questions on in social media. What do we do, Ray, now? And I have thoughts on it. And again, we'll dedicate an entire episode to it in the next day or two. But let's now hear from Conchita Reyes, who's going to give us her personal reflections on her time as a survivor turned responder during Harvey. And I'll be back to discuss some good news and give thanks to this week's holiday. Yeah, we're really happy to have on the line here on Ray's Talk Show a longtime friend, someone that does a lot of good things, is well known to the Houston community, a business advisor, and as she refers to herself, which I think is very appropriate, community servant, which from our perspective is a very powerful statement in of itself. Conchita Reyes, welcome finally to Ray's Talk Show. It's been well overdue.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Now, earlier today, and Conchita was so generous with her time here over Labor Day weekend to share this few moments with us. I had almost been a little hesitant to reach out to my friends like Conchita and Yvette Mayo and others out in Houston, because I know that this is, even if they seemed like they were doing okay from what you saw on social media, it's a very agonizing time. So, Conchita, first of all, how is your family doing? And maybe you can walk the listeners through just kind of what the last week has been like in terms of when the storm hit and how you've dealt with it personally, and just kind of the feeling in Houston 8 or 9 days into this ordeal.
No, definitely. First of all, once you start getting these warnings where they start predicting the path of the hurricane, it brings your attention to the point where it's like, okay, how do I assess my family? On a personal level, I have 3 kids and a husband, and they had just started school. So they're already, two of them were into their second week of school, and the other one was barely in his first week of school. So then the notice started coming out that, Friday was going to be probably a day where they were going to allow parents to assess what they need to do, if they need to evacuate or if they need to prepare. So Friday, school was canceled, and we basically started to prepare, but actually we prepared the night before because we knew Friday was probably going to be crazy. So Thursday night, we went out and got the supplies we needed for the time being, and then loaded up our cars with gas in case we needed to evacuate. We were very blessed in the fact that we had 5 retention ponds that pretty much collected all the water around us. So our streets never got flooded. Our house was never damaged of any type of storm, wind damage or anything like that. So we were very blessed. The whole neighborhood was blessed. But the people around us, unfortunately, were near creeks. And so that's where the overflow was. The creek areas took in so much water at such a high rate of time that it just overflowed. And what people need to understand is that we were in the ugly side of the hurricane. So that was pretty much consistent from Friday until, the storm hit. And then basically, it started to shift towards our direction in Houston, and it sat on us for a while. And then it slowly moved to Beaumont and Port Arthur. So in either case, whether we were on the ugly side or we got hit or we were still on the east side, we were still getting hit with water. So if you look at a time lapse, and there's one in particular on Facebook where the time lapse shows, just the water never was allowed to drain. And so it just kept accumulating. And that's what happened. Houston got hit with just a nonstop amount of rain.
Now, Conchita, help our listeners with the geography of where is your community there in the Houston area, and give people a sense of where you were at on the map there.
Yeah, we're in Spring, Texas. So basically it's like 24 miles away from downtown Houston.
Okay.
And so we're like between Houston and the Woodlands area.
Got you. Okay.
So, a lot of this is new development. And that's one of the things that has always been pointed out is that these small little areas like Spring, Texas, Katy, Missouri City, and they're starting to develop to the point where it's like new subdivision. And what's happening is all these trees that we used to be able to accumulate the water, collect it, and now we don't have those trees. And so the runoff is starting to go straight down to Houston. And so there's no division where there's no layers, levees areas, except for the ones in Addicts and the ones in the Katy area. But other than that, there's no real slow control of the water. So when it starts to drain, there's nothing to stop it to drain to Houston. Because it's a natural flow. You have the bayous over there. And so it's developed to where the creeks go into the bayous and the bayous go into the port of Houston and out that way.
So I would think over this week you kind of had three hats as a mother. First of all, kind of mama bear, right? Like, seems like your immediate family was okay, but I would imagine you have a network of family and friends that you're checking in on, making sure they're okay, providing whatever assistance you could, and then you also had to sort of move around day to day, making, I would imagine after a week you were probably running low on groceries and stuff like that, but also this, and I've seen, you've been very active on social media with sort of just spreading the word around how people could help. So you've had the hat of kind of you and your husband and your family around trying to figure out how you could serve others during this that were less fortunate. So just take us through that whole process, because I would imagine, there's lots of people you had to check up on that seemed like your immediate family was in the right, a fortunate area there. And then we're making sure that the rest of your larger community, you were doing what you could, because I would imagine being in the situation you're in, you want to feel like you're contributing to mediating people that weren't as fortunate. No,
definitely. Well, first of all, you hit the nail on the head. Basically, I wanted to make sure my kids were okay. My husband's company needed to be secured. The minute the storm hit over here in the Houston area, which again, we got the ugly side and then we started to get hit, we became part of an island. So we really couldn't get out. Even though we were safe and we were dry and our streets weren't flooded, the people around us was flooded. So even if we wanted to get out, we couldn't. And so basically, the kids were kind of getting antsy, so we kept them busy and so forth. And my husband, volunteered to go rescue some families over there in the Cypress Wood area, which got hit really hard because, again, it was near a creek. And I started to see people asking for help through Facebook, and slowly I started getting emails and texts, hey, my, family members in Spring, do you know anybody that could probably pick them up and everything? So I started to see that, okay, people are needing to be evacuated in these areas. And there's a new app called, well, I say new because it was new to me. It was Zello, Zello, and it's a dispatch. It's like a CB that trekkers use. And I loaded up the app and I started to study it and figure out what I needed to do. And sure enough, I would start posting people's locations, and basically, the idea was to make sure you put their address, make sure it's subdivision, make sure you put point of contact, phone number, medical needs, because if they were in the wheelchair, you need a bigger boat. If if it was more than two people, they probably needed a flat big boat. So we're looking at maybe flat boats with no engines. We're looking at big boats with engines in it. And then I know in Kingwood was requesting a lot of the 75 horsepower boats or bigger because of the amount of water that was coming from the San Jacinto River, which is completely different than a creek. So it's a little bit more force in the waters. And so, we started hearing a lot of stuff. So we started dispatching certain rescuers. And the first ones that came out to help us were the Cajun Navy rescuers. And those were the guys that had their A team going. I mean, they had their dispatch team, they had their rescuers and all that. And that's what started to propel this kind of system where we got boaters, we had, guys with trucks and boats, and we're ready to rescue, and we would just dispatch them out to certain areas, Katy and Spring and Kingwood and near Lake Houston. And so that I did it for about 2 days. And then I noticed that there was another wave hitting, and that was going into Beaumont and Port Arthur and Orange, Texas, Vidor. And Vidor got hit twice. They got hit with rain, and then they got hit with their levee as well. So I started helping with that dispatch as well. And then we had some people that were from here at Houston, but they had families in Port Arthur. So we were trying to help and assist in locating, because at that point they were just picking them up from the tops of the roofs and then moving them to dry ground. But there was no real shelter set up or drop off point because it came so quickly for them. And in reality, the whole discussion was the main ground zero was going to be Rockport, and then it was going to slowly move to Houston. But then after that, the predictions couldn't come through as fast enough as when the storm was ready to move on after Houston. So after we did that, basically, of course, I made sure all my family was, my extended family was well. And we had one uncle that got hit hard at Kneville. He had about 5 foot of water and everything. And it was like, not just the house, but it was all his property was under 5 foot of water. And so we basically, I tell him I'm on standby. You need me. Tell me if you need supplies. I'll get them from here from Spring, go over there and take them to you. And basically, with the blessings that he has, his neighbors were helping him. And then, some of my cousins went over there to help him as well. So again, now I'm at a point where it's like, I need to help, and that's the issue of hand, is that when you feel like, you're useless at this point because, you want to be available, you want to help, but in what point do you do it? And so I had a neighbor that was hitting some of the disbursements centers, not the shelters, but where the drop-off point was going to be for food, water, and necessities. And so she found this church called Northwest Baptist Church, and she said, they're really organized and everything, and they're, needing help, sorting out the stuff. So I said, okay, I'll go with you. And so I took my kids and everything, and then all of a sudden they were like, hey, we need drivers for Liberación Baptist Church off of Veterans Memorial. So it was 3 of us in a caravan. We said, we'll do it, So we threw everything that they needed, dropped it off, and we got to know the pastor. And he says, I'm actually going into, what he called the heart of the beast. He says, I'm going to every trailer park there is. I'm going to every apartment that we're dealing with, kind of like slumlords. They really don't care. These people have to clean out their own apartments, to accommodate their space and all of that. And he says, so I'm going over there. The hardest hit where was Rose Hill on Gulf Bank, and then there was the apartment complex on Seminar. And so we were like, okay, well, we're going to drop off this load, and then we'll be back. We're going to volunteer with them. And then, we kind of like, we're trying to get a feel of things. And so when we went back to Northwest Baptist Church, they said, hey, we need somebody to go Dickinson. So we're like, okay, count us in. So they loaded up our cars with our vehicles with the water and all the necessities and everything. And we didn't know what we were going to look at. We didn't know if we were going to have access or be able to get to Dickinson. All we knew is that, they needed volunteers, they needed help, and we were there, and we were going to do whatever it takes to get the supplies to Dickinson. And so we pretty much caravan together with our hazards lights on so that we wouldn't lose each other. But not only that, we had this important supplies for Dickinson. And so we headed out, and it took us 45 minutes to get there. And these people were dealing with, I saw an apartment complex that probably had 10 feet of water.
Wow.
And basically when you drove on the main street, if you look to your right and left, you saw houses that were literally gutted and thrown onto the side of the streets. And I mean, just rows and rows of streets gutted, and even businesses were, some of the metal frame that were holding the glass caved in, so all the water just went into their business. And so, but the amazing part was you saw people out there just, doing whatever needed to be done to get back into business and get back into a natural, routine of life. And so we went back to Dickinson, we left, and then we kind of huddled together. And by that point, my friend was already raising funds on an app called Venmo, Venmo. And basically, she was collecting money, and she would take pictures of where she was going and what she was doing. And people started dropping in hundreds and $500 and so forth. And so she says, I have all this money. She goes, where do you think we need to go? And I said, let's go back to Pastor Jay and let's go to these trailer homes and these apartments. And so that's what we did. The next day, we went to Walmart, stocked up on everything that, the wish list per se. And we told Pastor Jay that we were going to head over there and we were going to help. And that's what we did. We sorted out the stuff. They had some stuff already from Northwest Baptist Church. And we told him we wanted to go and we wanted to assess what we were seeing. And so he took us to the trailer homes. And I tell you what, it was really eye-opening to the point of appreciation of life, because these people were rallying together, going through their homes, cleaning it out, but they also lost their vehicles, and they were trying to make the vehicles that were wet work again. And luckily, they had a mechanic in the trailer homes that was so knowledgeable that he pretty much did like a makeshift, mechanic shop, and he would go to each trailer home telling each guy what he needed to do to get his car running. And, this is where they're gutting out their car. So they're taking out the carpet, they're taking out the car seats and everything, letting it dry through the sun. These kids were already getting mosquito bites on them. So we went and dropped off diapers and formula and water and, your standard canned foods and stuff and mosquito repellent. Because basically Houston's a swamp. So, any amount of water collected on the ground, is a incubator for mosquitoes. So basically, these kids were getting bombarded. So we took mosquito repellents and so forth. And that's the same thing we did to the apartment. We took pictures and we got another $2,000 from the pictures. So then we went back to Walmart and did the same thing. We contacted Northwest Baptist Church, did the same thing, went and got about 6 trucks full of necessary materials for them. By then, and here's another thing, phase 1 is rescue. The way we see it is rescue and shelter. Phase 2 was food and medicine. Phase 3 was cleaning products and demo. And so by the time we got to the apartments in these trailer homes, they were already going into their phase 3, clean up, Clorox everything, disinfect everything. So that was the most requested items that we were getting. So we kept going back to Walmart and buying, boxes and boxes of bleach and Clorox and, mops and, Clorox wipes and, and they appreciate it. That was one of the things. They didn't ask for anything more. Some of them says, oh, we already have water. Go give that to somebody else. Some of them were like, hey, I have to share this story with you. When we went to the apartments, this lady, literally looked like she was crawling out of her hospital bed, walking towards me. And in Spanish, I told her, what do you need? And she literally lifted up her 2-day-old baby, held him up and says, whatever you have for him. And I said, you know what? Give her all the formula we have in the trucks, diapers, infant diapers and everything. And I told her, give me your apartment number and I'll go and get whatever else you need from the distributing center. And if not, we'll go buy it. Because, you could tell it was really not planned for her to have that baby that soon. I mean, to be that surprised that, and that was the thing. A lot of these women that were pregnant end up even going to labor sooner than usual because of the stress level.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And you're listening to Conchita Reyes. She is giving you an on-the-ground personal report of her incredible last 8 or 9 days of her life. Thank goodness all of her family is safe. And of course, we give our love and support to everyone that's dealing with this natural disaster in Texas and in Louisiana and throughout that region. And Conchita, again, we really appreciate first of all, your service to your residents, your neighbors and friends. And again, you're really living the servant leadership model that we've been that is a focal point of this podcast and our network, which is about taking care of the people that are often forgotten about in our society, those folks in trailer parks. I would imagine, amongst not only the most forgotten about in our society, I would imagine a healthy amount are immigrants and, have various statuses here. And so maybe, some of them may be leery or scared to reach out for support. So the fact that you and your network lend a helping hand and, let them know that they were in a safe space. Thank you again on behalf of people that aren't from there for the work you're doing there. And again, our prayers and love to everyone down there. Conchita, I wanted to ask you 2 last questions. The first one is, what have you learned on a personal level through this experience that you'd like to share with our audience, again, who's all over the country, all over the world, who can only imagine what you all have gone through over the last week?
I think overall, with all these political issues that we were having prior, it could be easily ignored when something like this comes about and that we show our true colors, which is the love that we have for each other. It doesn't matter. And I was mentioning to my husband, I said, this hurricane had no discrimination. He hit rich, poor. He hit, Muslim, Christian, Jewish. He hit black, white, Hispanic. I mean, he hit everybody. So, basically, we had to show a united front and show that we could, support each other, love each other, be there for each other, and just go out there and rebuild, for whatever it takes, however long it takes, back to where our natural life was. So,
and it's going to take some time. I mean,
oh, definitely.
You speak about the mosquitoes. I mean, the mold and all these homes. There's the majority of people that are going to lose their homes don't have flood insurance. And are working folks. So it's going to be, this is about years. This isn't about weeks or months. That's for sure.
Exactly. And now we just got a report requesting for ant poison and rat poison. So you can just imagine all that trash that's being set aside. I mean, it's going to be an incubator for rats.
And it's getting hot down there. It's hot and heavy.
It's hot and humid right now. Yes.
That doesn't make it any better.
With Katrina, once the rain stops and the cold front moved away and everything, you get that humid swamp feeling, and that's what you get right now. You get like 96, 100, field temperature.
Conchita, what else would you like people to know about this experience, or what our friends and neighbors are experiencing down there that you think will be helpful that maybe hasn't gotten covered? And also, what should people be doing? I know there's so many charities, and there's been lots of discussions amongst our personal network, in terms of, do you contribute to the Red Cross? Do you try to find a local organization? Do you contribute to your church network? Do you contribute to a local Latino organization? Some of these. So what, just your thoughts about what people should know that they may not realize, and what people should be doing, particularly people that don't live in the Houston area?
Well, first of all, I think everybody needs to understand that these weathers are God of nature. So basically, you don't know what to expect. I mean, you can't predict. You have to prepare for an idea of what the storm might be, but you never know. I mean, the whole time that the storm was here, we were more concerned of tornadoes than the hurricane itself, because basically we kept getting every hour a warning of tornadoes and tornadoes and tornadoes. So, you don't know if it might be you, or it might be like 2 miles away, or in Katy and you're in Spring. But it was one of those things where the storm was hitting so fast that, it would spring up a tornado, and you just didn't know if it was you or another town. Another thing is that, going back on your nonprofits, I mean, basically, to be honest with you, it's what your heart desires. and that's why, I feel like it's so important to post on Facebook. I just got a donation from Chicago of $100, and I told him, I'm going to post exactly where I put your money at, and he says, no, I have no worry. He goes, I saw what you were doing in the past, and I know you'll give it to somebody. And so, my main objective right now is hitting the elderly that might not have family in the vicinity, might need assistance. A lot of them probably won't get their disability checks because, again, there's something going on where you have to check what post office it's located, and I think you even have to go get it. So, and that was earlier on. They might have regained the postal system again, but those are the things that, when you're elderly, you're dependent on a check and so forth. And if you don't have the direct deposit, you have to go and take the check. And, and unfortunately, we have some scammers that take advantage of the elderly. So I'm working with State Representative Armando Wale, and I asked him, I said, any elderly, you send them our way. We will take them food. We'll take them water. Right. Whatever they need, we'll go to them. So that's what we're hoping to do this next phase.
I'm glad you shouted out a State Representative Wale, good guy. And, I think your local leadership from Mayor Turner to our other elected leadership down there to just all the first responders, the Cajun Navy, all the different responders down there. Of course, your police force has had a sad loss during this time. I think everyone, the Houston community, Conchita, I just want you to know that around the country, during this tragedy, y'all have people are seeing the unity that's taking place down there in the service from, again, our first responders to volunteers like yourself. And you've been listening to Conchita Reyes, business advisor, and more importantly, a community servant, someone very well known in the Houston area for her service and in many ways that don't get publicized. She's a contributor, a fighter, someone that keeps very close tabs on the issues impacting her community. And most importantly, a woman of faith and someone that I know was working really closely with her family and her extended network. So Conchita, just again, all the best to your family, particularly your uncle or your relative that's having that really got badly hit with his home. And we'll keep in touch with you. And once the waters subside, we'll have to have you back on Ray's Talk Show to talk about some of your business acumen and give some people some good financial advice on here and continue these conversations. We have to have our Tahanas in the mix for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And a shout out to all the volunteers that we'll never know their names.
That's right.
That came out from West Texas, Dallas, North Carolina, the fuel trucks that came in for the rescuers, the food that has been dropped off. We'll never know their names, but we appreciate everything that was done for our community.
Well, they'll be acknowledged, I'm sure, one way or another. So, Conchita, again, thank you so much, and stay safe.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you again, Conchita. In the coming episodes, we'll have more people from the Gulf Coast of Texas join Ray's Talk Show to keep us informed of Harvey's aftermath and what we can all do to support our family in the Houston area. I know I'll be rooting for the Astros. That'll be part of my contribution. I'd like to see Altuve, Correa, and the boys make some moves in the playoffs. That's a team I root for anyway, and I know that I think we'll all become Astros fans here in the coming weeks. On to some good news that came out of Texas last week. For those that missed it, a federal district court judge granted a temporary injunction to block many elements of SB 4, Texas's essentially their new Show Me Your Papers law, from being implemented. SB 4 was passed into law by the state legislature and Governor Greg Abbott in the spring. It would essentially make racial profiling lawful towards Latinos in the state, which is 40% of the Texas population. Kudos to MALDEF and other leading advocacy groups for fighting against this injustice through the courts. The legal pillar of the social justice movement historically has been an essential tool. You think about the history of the civil rights movement and lawyer turned Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and that monotonous, tedious, but necessary steps within courts to protect our civil rights lead to, in this case, defending, at least temporarily, our rights as we currently have them. So kudos to our legal activists. They do yeoman's work. And we will continue to follow the SB4 fight in Texas in the coming days and months. And let's give the Labor Day movement some love today. You know, labor earned this day of barbecuing and spending time with family. There's no question about that. You know, without the labor movement, we wouldn't have 40-hour work weeks, overtime pay, pension benefits, or things like parental leave, among many other policy achievements, landmark achievements for working people in this country. And if you really look at it from a historical perspective, the ills of our economy for working people can really be marked by the disempowerment of the labor movement in this country over the last 40 years. You know, when my grandfather was my age, probably close to 40% of the United States working population was in a labor movement, and that gave them access to livable wages, safer work conditions, and other necessary benefits, vacation days, and we've seen an erosion of that. So now we're less than 10% of the population is unionized, and we see from how companies like Walmart manipulate current labor laws to benefit them and create huge, Walmart being huge welfare recipients, probably the biggest welfare recipient in our country, and many other ways that the erosion of power in the labor movement had leading to a lot of the economic tensions that are at the heart of some of the most challenging portions of these ongoing political conversations. And so let's honor the labor movement towards increasing labor rights for all. Let's do what we can to support labor by expanding their bases of membership, supporting policies like livable wages, pushing back against work to right laws in your states, which impact most of the people listening to this program, unfortunately. And let's again honor the men and women of the labor movement on this Labor Day weekend and week. Thank you so much for listening to Ray's Talk Show. Please subscribe and give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, anywhere you download this podcast. You can not only download it, subscribe, share it with your friends, but also provide us a review. Even if you give us a review on Stitcher or Spotify or SoundCloud, it's all good. You can put a comment within the timeline on SoundCloud. We love the interaction. Please reach out to us and continue that conversation. And check us out at racepodcast.com or Twitter at racepodcast. Again, email us at podcastrays@gmail.com. That's podcastrays@gmail.com. Support our dreamers and continue to resist. God bless.